Thanks, Debbie, for the kind words. Folks, it's very interesting to listen to Dr. Helen, and of course the video clippings as well as the feedback that we heard. Dr. Helen's introduction on ethnicity, race, and the various issues on identity. And I think those are some things that we have to take into account as we discuss afterwards the complexities of definition and terms and the politicization of it. I think we had a very clear message from Dr. Joseph Kumar from a more biblical vision and theme, challenging the challenges in the church that needs to be the new alternative community, but in itself is struggling with the issues because we are also part of the world. So are we in the world but not of the world? Are we the new community, the new kingdom, or are we a reflection of the old? And sometimes the Methodist Church, we say we are like a Barisan Nasional. So that's the problem. You got Tamil, Chinese, Iban, the Asli, and sometimes the conflicts within is tough. I used to be a pastor where I was also a pastor of the Tamil Methodist Church before, and if you were, depending who controls the building and who is sharing the building, and we had all kinds of confusion. And that's a story in itself. As part of it, I don't know whether you went eventually, there was one church where we had the English congregation, Tamil congregation, and the Chinese congregation. We had 3 organs, 3 PA systems, because each could not trust the other with the system. So there was a meeting to decide on one single wiring system. If not, we needed 3 plug systems, because you can't touch mine and I can't touch yours, sort of thing. But that's the real challenge of everyday Christianity and the issues vis-a-vis that. Now, I think we have heard scripture, we have heard terms, sociological, other areas. I thought mine would focus on contemporary struggles in the Malaysian context and whether they are instruments from the human rights perspective that gels with a biblical vision to overcome racism and address them, and what are the challenges vis-a-vis that. Now, quickly to look at, I think there are 3 major challenges in the Malaysian context. Dr. Helen alluded to them in her presentation. One is the political contestation. So, ethno-nationalistic way of defining politics and making sure that race is at the heart of Malaysian politics is still the real contestation, whether in Barisan Nasional or the alternative, and people are being grouped in that way. That means if I want a car mechanic, I try and find the best mechanic. If I want a doctor, I'll search for the best doctor in the field. If I want a lawyer, I'll search for the best who can get me out of my crime or whatever it might be. But when it comes to politics, I want to find somebody of my own color and skin who will protect my interest. And does he protect your interest or not really at the political level? So political contestation, this was alluded to earlier as well, majority, minority, superiority, inferiority, and the social processes in defining history or rewriting history, the social propagation that takes place, the indoctrinations that take place subtly or as simple as a child, mother is trying to feed and then says, look at the Indian, he's going to catch you and go, or the bearded man will catch you. It's an indoctrination of a little 2-year-old child, or the one. So these are things, the social construct, the political contestation, and this is something we would discuss and see how do we challenge these from a faith perspective. And I think that's what Dr. Joseph highlighted to us, that is it consistent to have very strong racist feelings like the South Africana church had in its oppression of the black and justified it from the Bible. Now I think second, which we also looked to earlier, is whether we are identified in singular identities or are there multiple identities. So whether it's the color, our ethnicity, our heritage, our racial background. So if you are Indian, what kind of an Indian are you? In a sense, what's your heritage? So are you Malayali, are you Tamil, are you Telugu, are you Punjabi, are you Gujarati, are you Sindhi? We say Bengali, but actually Bengali is actually Punjabi, and people from Bengal are actually Bengalis, and this. So even Chinese, then what kind of a Chinese, and the background and your heritage, your language group, and things of that sort. Now I'm categorized Indian till I went to India, and then was part of Indian level, high level discussion, and I wanted to get a PIO card, People of Indian Origin card. And I cannot get a People of Indian Origin card because you have to tell the village that your grandfather comes from. Now my grandfather doesn't come from India, he comes from Sri Lanka, or then was called Ceylon, and he comes from the northern part, which is Jaffna. So then I have to say, you know, the mythology of Rama and Sita, they went from South India across and all that. So you can't get, but Malaysia categorizes people like me as Indian, technically not. So and these were discussed. Third, I think it is the mechanisms for helping to resolve. So there are conflict, there will be contestation, even people of the same ethnic, sub-ethnic, language, religious group have conflicts and difficulties. How do we resolve them? Dialogue, formal dialogue, consultation, formal mediation process, private sector got arbitration, you got court system, the systems of restraint, punishment, things of this sort. So I think if we take all these contestation, what are the instruments and frameworks that can guide us? And I thought it would be helpful. I'm not a lawyer, I'll also qualify. I'm, supposed to have theology and sociology, so you're not sure what you are. But I tend to talk a lot about the law. So I tell people I'm lawyer Burro, although Edmund Boone uses that term, but actually Edmund Boone is a qualified lawyer. So I tell them they cannot use lawyer Burro, because people like me are the lawyer Burro. I think we need, very quickly I will highlight some things. Dr. Helen alluded to this as well. The Constitution as a guiding framework, as well as actually 3 documents, international documents that can help us in the discussion. Now, one of course is the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. Now, a lot of people say this is Western, it shouldn't be applied, it's anti-Asian values and things like that. But actually, Parliament adopted UDHR when they passed the Suhakam Act. And this is the strongest document that Parliament enacted it into. So the Suhakam Act defines human rights from the UDHR, which is consistent to the federal constitution. So only portions that are inconsistent to this, you can avoid. So majority of the UDHR actually is consistent with the federal constitution. So in a sense, the UDHR actually stands because it's defining term for Suhakam, and so we need to popularize that. The UDHR brings out a theme which is in Genesis 1:27 from the creation narrative, and subsequently it's a theme that carries on in the Bible. All human beings are born free and equal in dignity and rights. We use the term created in the image of God. They are endowed with reason and conscience and should act towards one another in a spirit of brotherhood. Then in 1948 language, which also includes the sisters as well. Now, Article 2, everyone is entitled to all the rights and freedoms set forth in this declaration without distinction of any kind, such as race. So we have defined race in the broader sense, or ethnicity in the sub areas, color, whether black, white, Caucasian, whatever, sex, which is here referring to gender. It also incorporates in many ways sexuality, language, religion, political, other opinion, national or social origin, property, birth or other status. Therefore, no distinction shall be made on the basis of any political, judicial, international status. And so, this is not saying that all are put in a pot and you're only one race. What's then saying is human beings as a whole, irrespective of your cultural, religious, whatever diversity and difference, you have rights and freedoms that need to be respected by all. So these are freedoms that have emerged. I brought in another document because of the Islamic context that we are in, where the OIC and other leaders brought the Cairo Declaration on Human Rights. Those who are proponents of the UDHR would feel Cairo Declaration doesn't meet the standards, but nonetheless, there is a phrase that is the opening of the Cairo Declaration that I think is helpful because there is consensus, at least on the creation narrative. All human beings form one family whose members are united by their subordination to Allah and descent from Adam. All men are equal in terms of basic human rights and basic obligations and responsibilities without any discrimination on the basis of race, color, language, belief, sex, religion, political affiliation, social status, and other considerations. The true religion is the guarantee for enhancing such dignity along the path to human integrity. So what we are then saying is, even from those who propagate Islam, the framework that they worked out recognizes God as the creator and human beings as human beings of the world in that sense. The document that we are highlighting, and you can do a Google search on the UN website, you use ICERT or CERT, you would get, is the International Convention on the Elimination of All Forms of Racial Discrimination. And there are only 16 countries in the world out of 190 something that did not ratify this. So over 170 countries of the world, majority of OIC countries and others, have ratified this. That means they say we are against racism, except we form one of the 16, which is Malaysia, along with Korea, Angola, Brunei is there, Singapore is there on this context. So that's something civil society and others have been lobbying. We have had many discussions trying to get the Malaysian government to say, if we are truly one Malaysia, we should be in the forefront of ICERT, but they don't want to. Now, in the convention, the term racial discrimination shall mean any distinction, exclusion, restriction, or preference based on race, color, descent, national or ethnic origin, which has the purpose or effect of nullifying or impairing the recognition, enjoyment, or exercise on an equal footing of human rights and fundamental freedoms in the political, economic, social, cultural, or any other fields of public life. So that means no form of discrimination. All of us, irrespective of our diversity, should have access to all public sector employment opportunities in the way they are treated. That's why the global movement was so strong against apartheid or any form of racism of that kind. But there is a clause 4 in ICET, special measures, and this then is qualified. Special measures are permitted for affirmative action and positive discrimination because you want to undo a disadvantage of a poor, disadvantaged, socio-economic backward group that you need. And then the UN came up with general recommendations number 32, which is meaning and scope of special measures in the international convention. So we have said to the Malaysian government, actually ratifying means it is not nullifying Article 153 of the Federal Constitution, but the measures are defined. You have to be transparent, you have to be open, you have to be accountable, which we then believe the Federal Constitution is. So there are international instruments, there are measures at the global level to investigate, there are measures, although there have been problems in the Sri Lankan context, and the most recent of the UN investigation is the war crimes in the last few days of civilian killings, which has been the accusation. The UN has undertaken its study through a 3-member, and this was over a period of time where the UN had to have full decision. On the first one, Malaysia did not support the UN team to investigate. Second time, the UN took the resolution. It was led by the US, UK, because the UK Prime Minister went to Jaffna during the Commonwealth Heads of State meeting to look at it, and finally the UN team was allowed. This is just to investigate whether and interview people from an independent basis. A report has been done. The UN, for the first time, the Human Rights Council or the High Commissioner agreed to withhold the report. They never do it because of transparency. They responded because the Prime Minister of Sri Lanka lost the elections, and the new Prime Minister has promised to support the UN fully on everything, and they wanted input in the report. So this is the first time the UN is withholding a report for 6 months. Now, I thought it would be important for us to just few minutes look at the Federal Constitution and then open up. Just guide me in terms of time. And okay. Now, if we take the Federal Constitution, are ethnic groups referred to? Because when Dr. Helen was speaking, I suddenly was looking up at the Federal Constitution. So what are the racial groupings mentioned in the Federal Constitution? So if we actually look at Part 3, it's defining citizenship. Now, if you don't have a Federal Constitution, buy one. It's not very expensive. You can get one. You can get a very in-depth one that gives you, and I've started to learn this. All the amendments to the Federal Constitution are listed at the back. So you can get a version which is the original and where the amendments all came in, at which periods, what amendment. And it's quite interesting to see that who was the Prime Minister at that time who made most of the amendments to the Constitution and what is its impact for us. So in defining citizens, all of us then stand as equal citizens, because that is defined in Article 8, 1, 2, and 3, no discrimination, all citizens, all persons are equal before the law and entitled equal protection of the law. And then it's defining the citizen, how you become a citizen, before 57, after 57, after 1963, these sort of things are defined and the issues related to them in securing that. So what are the terms available? So the terms come in Article 153, where it has the word Malays. So the Malays as a group is now being defined. Natives of Sabah and Sarawak is defined. Other communities is also a phrase given. Other community, I couldn't find Indian or Chinese in the word, but other communities are there. Article 8 has another defining phrase, which I quickly looked up just now, Article 8, which brings out, sorry, I can't get my Article 8, yeah. In Article 8(5)(c), Aboriginal peoples of the Malay Peninsula. And then you have a subsequent act, which is the Orang Asli Act, which will define who these are. I think Sabah and Sarawak have qualifying acts that will define who the natives of Sabah, Sarawak are. I think there's no act defining who an Indian or Chinese is, except if you look at the census form, it then has all the subcategories, Hokkien, Cantonese, and all that. My wife is Fu Chao, so she's also categorized in that context. I'm not sure whether Jaffna Tamil, yeah, I think it'll come under Tamils. So you got South Indian Tamil, Jaffna Tamil is defined. I think Dr. Helen mentioned Malay, and Malay is important because this is the point of actual contestation that is taking place in the context of the Malays. And there is a definition section which is 160. Malays mean a person who professes the religion of Islam, habitually speaks the Malay language, conforms to Malay culture. So technically, as Dr. Helen said, a Chinese could be categorized as a Malay in that sense. But there is a second part which is often silent, and historians and others have used the Malay archipelago kind of a concept. Because who is this Malay who professes religion of Islam and all? Can somebody today from Aceh come and claim the constitutional definition of Malay? Actually cannot. And this has been written out by civil society, even people from the interfaith Majlis and all. This Malay was before Merdeka born in the Federation or in Singapore, or both parents, one of whom was born in the Federation or in Singapore. This is why when Uday Kumar, the Hindraf leader, then asked Kim Toyo, tell me where your grandfather came from or your father came from, and I'll tell you where my father came from. His father was local born, whereas Kim Toyo's father came from Indonesia or somewhere. So this is the contestation that's taking place with a new arrival and the old. Now the term Bumi, Bumiputra is not used in the English version. It's come into the Malay version. Now then I'm told, and this I'm still checking, they say when there is a dispute between English and Malay, I thought English will stand because it's written in English, but at some point the constitution was amended to say when there is a conflict, the Malay would actually be the interpretation. So a lot of the problems of interpretation is if you read the Malay version of the constitution and the English version. If you remember when the Court of Appeal judge ruled on Article 3, peace and harmony in any part of the Federation, the Bar Council said that it was a strange way of reading the federal constitution, because in Malay it sounds different. It is not Islam and other religions are practiced in peace and harmony, which means other religions are practiced peace and harmony. The interpretation comes other religions must be practiced in peace and harmony with Islam. Only then it's constitutional. It's a different reading. So if we take that and let me, these are being defined and it's being politicized and the issues emerge. And let me close with Article 153, because if one takes the Article 153, it's affirmative action. And Tun Sufyan and others who have written about this will clearly define it, that it is special position and there are qualifiers in the federal constitution. I'm not here making a seditious speech, but I'm saying it's qualified. Special position doesn't mean ketuanan. It doesn't mean special rights. It means special position, and it is balanced with the term legitimate interest. It's also in 153. Anyone who advocates 153 also advocates legitimate interest. Second, all measures must be deemed reasonable, which is it, the word deemed reasonable. What is reasonable? How do you measure what is reasonable? So if you got 10 places, if you take 9 and give 1 away, is that reasonable? So how do you define reasonableness? Then third, it is restricted in 3 areas: public service, education, trade, and business. It's then qualified, as others have expressed, and it's important for us to know that in Article 153, the provision is only for entry into the civil service, and it's entry only in federal positions. And in the area of promotions, there should be no discrimination, because there's a cross-reference to Article 136, where once you are in the civil service, there can be no discrimination. So what we are then saying is, it's within this context that as Malaysian Christians, we need to understand the federal constitution. There is contestation. There are rights and responsibilities. We have to respect, as others have already presented, diversity and richness. There cannot be any form of superior feeling. And Chinese could feel that. Indians could feel that as well. I always say that within the Indian community, with the caste system and the superiority feeling of one section from another, those are also issues that we need to challenge in that sense. And therefore, I think there are no easy answers, but we need to prayerfully look at and then see how we reach out across race, religion, build friendships, and a good indication of seeing who are your friends, who are your closest friends, whose houses would you visit, would be an indication. But the phobia of the other is something we need to fight against, and we can look at law, we can look at sociology, and we can look at theology. Thank you very much.